Hey guys, DM Scotty here. Welcome to the craft. Today I have a really cool craft for you. We are just going to show you how versatile the craft can be. Toilet paper rolls, toilet paper, white glue, hot glue gun. We are going to make something just badass out of just junk and a few little other items. And you're not going to believe what you can make out of just that junk. So let's go to the table and we will start crafting a giant purple worm. Yes, I said it, purple worm. Alright, so we're going to start the mouth. And what I did was I just took a toilet paper tube and I traced around it so I can get the size of the mouth. Now what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some Model Magic, which the package looks like this. And it's a pretty cheap child clay. But the thing I like about it is it's very light. So that's going to be cool because the structure of this creature isn't going to be very strong. So the lighter that we have this, the better. So I'll grab some out of the package here. And it's kind of almost like a foamy consistency. So I'll do is I think I'll grab about half of this and I'm gonna roll it in a ball. And then I'm gonna put it on here, but I'm gonna kind of poke a hole in it and get kind of like a donut shape. All right. I'll just kind of push that down. All right, so that's looking pretty good. So now my goal is I want to do some rows of teeth on this thing, okay? So what I've done is I've already pre-cut some toothpicks and barbecue skewers. So the barbecue skewers are bigger diameter than the toothpicks. So I'm going to just start putting these in like this. The larger ones on the outside and then the toothpicks on the inside, and then we'll come back. I'll go ahead and do that and then we'll come back to the next step. Here we go. Now I have all the pieces in there, you can see. And I put the smaller ones between the larger ones, which are the barbecue skewers. So now I'm just going to use a simple tool. All it has is kind of a curved end and a sharp end. And I'm going to kind of just go around each tooth. Just for some detail. So I'll go ahead and do that and then we'll come back. Okay, so now I've done that and you can see a little bit of detail on there. I'm going to zoom in here quite a bit because I want you to see what I'm going to do next, and that's the interior row of the teeth. So let me do that. So we're really starting to look like a spiky donut here. And I'll try to do on this outside edge so you can see me, and I'll try not to get in the way too much. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start between that one tooth and then move up to the next one. So I'm kind of giving, instead of just a circle, I'm giving some detail to that to make it a little more interesting. I hope you can see what I'm doing on camera here. And go around and do all that to all these small ones. Okay, so there we go. I think it's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to define these a little more, and then we'll come back for the next step. Alright, so I've got the gums pretty well defined. But what I want to do is I'm going to do a little bit of detail, so I'm going to kind of push in like this. And I have pushed it out of the circle a little bit, so that will kind of get it back in there. You could also use the tool and kind of go like this. And I may sculpt around there a little bit more, but what I'm going to do, the most important part I'm going to do is see how these teeth are starting to point in. I'm going to push them in or curve them in more so they're towards the center. And I'll do the same with these. So now it looks like a row of those teeth spiraling outwards, and then a smaller row in the center. So that's pretty cool. So like I say, I might do a little bit of sculpting on the edge here, a little more sculpting, and then we'll move on to actually constructing the worm itself. To build the body of the purple worm, we're going to use these old toilet rolls. And what I'm going to do is take one and kind of crush the end, like so, and then insert it into the next one. And then I'll kind of crush this one and insert it into this one. So now I've got kind of a segmentation that I can play with. You may ask, why didn't I just use a paper towel roll? Well, I'll basically have to break it, so I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of, fill these up with a little bit of toilet paper or paper towels. You can use either one. I'm just going to use toilet paper. So that way it will give them a little bit of strength. So I'll just kind of shove that in there until it fills it up. You don't have to super fill it. Just give it enough that it's not so easy to crush, okay? And so I'll do it for all the segments, and then we'll come back. So now I put enough in them to give them strength, okay? So let me reassemble this here. So I put that there, like this. Now, sticking up like that, that's not a very exciting worm. So, and generally, a worm's gonna be much bigger than anything else on the table, so you wanna kind of have it bending over to kind of try to get the people. So you can kind of crush it into the shape you want. You could even cut some of this, off on the bottom if you want it to be closer to the ground. So, but I think I'm liking that. With it kind of bended down like that. So what I'm going to do is I will use my glue gun, and then I'm going to start gluing this together. So I got my big glue gun. This will make it a little easier. Now let me talk about the glue gun for a second. A lot of modern glue guns have their tip covered up, their metal tip covered up with plastic, and that's for doing the DM's crafting. That's not really the ideal kind of glue gun, because I like that metal that I can move around the craft glue. I like to drag it on the craft glue sometimes, and if it has that plastic on it, it's only the tip that's exposed. So I would recommend, these are actually cheaper. Getting the gun with the metal on it is actually cheaper than getting a gun that's covered. So I'd recommend these kind of guns. All right, let's go back to our craft. So now I'm just going to start assembling this. So I'll just get some bunch of hot glue on there and just pop it in there. So now we'll glue all the segments together, and then we'll move on to the next step. Hey guys, I've got my armature done, and you can see it's just looks kind of crazy right now. All that bent up toilet paper. I did coat it with some hot glue to kind of keep it in shape while I put the wet toilet paper and paper towels on here. So hopefully that'll help keep it in shape. But see, I've got some gaps in there. I think what I'm going to do is take some of my toilet paper and wet it up, and then apply it to some of these gaps. So I'm just going to put it right in there, and then just put some white glue on it. So let me finish this up. I'll do this, fill up a little bit of these gaps, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so I filled in some of those gaps with the, oops, that one fell off. Okay, I filled in some of those gaps with some toilet paper. And I'm just going to go ahead and go right to the next step and start applying the skin to this. So yeah, it just looks kind of like a gaudy mess right now, but it'll be really cool when we finish. All right, so just going to grab a piece of paper towel, get that wet. I'm just wetting it in water. I'm actually going to apply the glue later. So for those of you who don't know my glue technique, I just generally use white glue, water, paper towels, or toilet paper, and I soak it, and then I put some glue on it. Okay, so let's see if we can get this in frame. So just going to wrap that around. And this is just a wet paper towel. That's all this is. So now I'll just start hitting it with the glue like this. And then spreading it out. So now I'll finish this up. I'll finish applying some up here to the top also, and we'll let this dry and then we'll move on to the next step. This is good to do while the body of the worm itself is drying and hardening up. And also I wanted to mention that while you're, make sure you put another coat of the white glue on it after it dries a bit, so it'll give it some strength. But the worms themselves tend to have like some kind of hard shell on the outside, the newer versions of the worm. So I'm going to do that, mimic that by using cardstock. And I've already started here. Basically these are 4 inches wide. I've marked 1 inch increments on the 4-inch wide strip, and you can see I've drawn a little bit on here. So what I'm going to do is I don't want to do just a straight strip. I want to try to mimic the carapace, so I'm going to do just draw like this, and you'll see why I'm doing this. So, and then I'll mimic it on the same thing on the other side, and it doesn't have to be perfect. See, I'm not worried about being totally perfect here. Okay, so now what I'll do is I will finish the rest of these and then we'll cut them out. Here I have my cardboard with the scalloped edge, and you can see I have those lines on there. So what I'm going to do is bend it on that line, and then I'm going to use a pair of pliers and go about 1/4 of an inch in and then grab and bend. So what I end up with is a dimple, okay, on the outside. Alright, so now when I finish, it's gonna end up looking like this. Alright, I'll have 3 dimples on the cardstock. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna finish those up, and then we'll come back to the table and do the next step. Alright guys, so here's our body of the worm, and it's pretty good. See, it's fairly solid there. But I want to add a little more detail to this. It has some nice detail with the glue and everything, but I want to add some more detail and strength. Excuse me. I'm going to use my large glue gun, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of ring this like this. So you can see that. So it'll kind of give it that illusion of the segmentation, but it'll also give it strength. So I'm going to do this on the whole body. My glue just ran out, so hold on a second. And then I'll go all the way around the worm and then kind of smooth that out a bit. Alright, so now I'll finish that up and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so I finished the segmentation on this, and I think it looks really cool. Now I didn't do the totally covering it. I didn't do the absolute back because I'm going to put those plates on that. So that'll be okay. I won't need to do that. So, but now I'm going to do something with the mouth here. So I'm going to kind of fill that in with a bit of hot glue. So I'll just kind of pull out big globs of hot glue. All right, so I'm going to play with that a bit, and then we'll come back for the next part. So I basically put a bowl of hot glue in there. It's hard to see that interior there, but I did a little bit of texture too by pulling the glue gun out of it after it dried a bit. So there we go. Now we'll move on to the next step. In this part, I'm going to put the teeth on because I want to blend them in before I start putting the carapace on. So what I'll do is I'll just rim this. And then I'll take the mouthpiece and get it on there. And the reason I did this first is because I want to blend this in before I put the carapace on. So I'll just take my glue gun and I'll start just kind of pulling, so that kind of blends into the rest of the beast. And we'll finish that up and move on to the next step. So now what I want to do is apply the carapace sections. So I will just take one and I'm going to just put some hot glue on it and apply it to the critter. So I'm just getting close to the mouth there. Make sure you keep those ridges, don't stretch it out too much. Alright, so there we go. So now we'll apply the next one. And just make sure you overlap the previous one. Like that. Don't lose your ridges. And so now we'll just continue that down the back of the worm. So here's a mid-process application. As you can see, it's twisting along with the segmented body. And really the trick to doing this is, you can see there's a bit of a curve here. So when you put it on there, you know, twist the cardstock a bit, squeeze the ridges together, and just bend the cardstock a bit to follow the body. Okay, so I want to give you kind of a mid body there application, and we'll continue with the rest of the segments. All right, we are back with our carapace completed, and you can see how that really came out nice. Gives it some really nice texture. I also wanted to mention that when I did the mouth, I forgot to say that I put some white glue on the, some dabs of white glue on the teeth where they connect with the gum, because this clay isn't a really solid clay, it's a really light clay, so I wanted to give it extra strength. So now the next step to this endeavor is I want to add some texture to the carapace, the shell. So what I'm going to do is just take the critter, and I'll just take I'm taking my small glue gun, and I'm just going to kind of go back and forth with that. And so I'm just going to do the whole thing like this. All right, so we get some texture on there. Also, I'm going to kind of fill in these little holes here with some glue where they connect to the gum. All right, so I'll go ahead and fill the rest of this in, and then we'll come back for the next step. Alright guys, I got the carapace done, and doesn't that look badass? Look at that material texture, I'm sorry, on the carapace there. I think that really looks cool. So now we're done with the worm. We're ready for the next step. So what I'm going to do is apply it to a base. Now you have several options. This is, you know, light, but it's still fairly heavy. But I'm going to stick with our cheap, dirty and cheap method, and I'm going to just use a cardboard base. So this is a thin cardboard base, and it is from an old FedEx box. So now I'm going to apply this to the base here. Okay. What I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to kind of strengthen the base a bit by adding some hot glue to it. So I'm just going to fill in the base like this. And this will help give it a little bit of strength. So I'll finish that up and then come back and we'll move to the next step. Alright, so here's our base. It's all ready to go. So now I'm going to glue the critter to it. Now, when you glue this, make sure you give it enough dry time because it's top heavy, so it's going to kind of want to pull over. So yeah, make sure you hold it long enough that it gets a nice bond. So I'm just going to goop the crap out of this thing with this hot glue. And then what I'm going to do is, once I get it on there, I am going to reinforce this sucker by adding even more hot glue around the edge once it sets up. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so that has dried on the base and we're good to go. Now I want to make it look like it's bursting out of the ground, so we're going to use the toilet paper technique on that. So I'm just going to grab some toilet paper, get it wet, and then just start applying it around the edge. Now there we go. Now I'll finish that up and I'll give you a look at it. So here's our worm, and our mound is around the exit hole has dried. So we're good to go. So we're going to start applying some hot glue. So I'll grab my large glue gun and just going to start adding some texture to that and just kind of blending it in the base. Alright, so I'll finish that up and then we'll move on to the next step. I've finished applying the mound, and make sure that when you do this, as with all glue gun techniques, that you don't just blob it on, you don't go and that's it. You want to really, there's a fine art between just blobbing it on and making it look like a big blob and giving it a texture. So, you know, when you're doing this, fill in the edge so it blends into the base, then go back over it with the glue gun and kind of give yourself, just squirt out a little bit of glue and give yourself some texture on there. So I hope you can see that. I know it's hard to see because it's like translucent, but you know, yeah, really think about that when you're doing textures on stuff. Don't just, you know, in this kind of a case, we need to blob it on because we need to fill in, you know, large areas and the edge. But once you do that, go back and then do some more texturing on it. It'll really make your pieces that much more better. So is that okay? That much better. All right, so that's a little talk about texturing, and now we're gonna move on to the next step. Hey guys, you'll notice I cut down my base a little bit, and I always like to do that afterward because it's good to find out. It's always better afterward to have too much than too little, and it's cardboard, you can always cut it, so that's what I did. So although it is a little front heavy, I'm going to use some weighted material on the base to give it some texture. So what I've got here is I've got my standard construction sand or standard sand. This is not play sand. It has different size aggregate in it, which just means that There's everything from sand to small pebbles. And then I also found this, someone was throwing it out and I just grabbed it. It's like fish tank gravel, and I'm going to use that too. These are a little bit bigger than what I have in my sand, so I'm going to use that. Now I'm just going to use my standard white glue to glue this down. I also got some tacky glue. This stuff runs it's not as runny as the standard white glue. I actually priced this at my local big box, and to buy this 8-ounce bottle was cheaper than to buy 2 bottles of the Elmer's Glue All, which is what I usually use. So I'm going to use this to glue the stones down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start like on the edge, and I'm going to grab a few stones and pop them on there. Alright, there we go. So we got some nice stones there. Now I'm going to come back with my Elmer's Glue All and add a little bit of some spaces here. This will be for the sand aggregate. Alright, so now I've got that all glued up. Just start piling on the sand. And I'm just going to cover that entire sucker up. Get in all the recesses. Alrighty, so we are good to go. We'll let that dry and then we'll come back for the next step. Alright, here's the big reveal. I'm going to try to make as little mess as possible so I can dump this back into my, my sand bucket. So let's see, I'll just start. Alright, so there we go. Looking really nice there. Some nice, nice texture on that. So now the next step is I'm going to spray paint this, the base black, and then we'll work on painting it. Alright guys, we're to our painting phase now, and as you can see I did some base painting on this critter. I wanted to kind of speed up the process, but I'll explain what I did. Okay, so you can see the base is very dark. So, well, first off I spray painted this just flat black, and then you can see the base is very dark, and I used a burnt umber for that, to do that. Then for the body, you know, it's a purple worm, so we need our purple. So I used a royal violet for that, and I just painted the entire body. Now you can see I painted the spines, or the ridges on the back. I painted the gums, and I painted the teeth. Okay. So what I did was I used a light ivory to paint the spines. Okay. I just followed the ridge of the spines. And same with the teeth. But before I painted the teeth, I painted them a rose bouquet. Okay, and then after that, I washed it with a cherry, a black cherry. All right, and then I did another application of the rose bouquet. Then I did the teeth. Now you can see the teeth do have a little bit of other coloration as do the spines. I did the same color. So I used a blue gray to give it some depth. So what I did is I painted it the ivory, then I washed it, which is just a light application of watery paint to all the spines and the teeth. Okay, so you can see it give it a little bit of like a shade, like a shadow on that. Okay, so that's where we're starting here. So I find that you know, there are some people out there that are fantastic painters, and you know, they don't need really any advice on painting. But there are some people that just have a really hard time painting, and I'm going to try to show you in this video how easy it really is. Okay, so now we'll move on to the application of our base. Now first off, we're going to work on the base. Okay, and you'll need a palette, and I've got some of the earth brown paint. Now, when you're painting, for you people who have a harder time painting, just think of, generally what I do is I do a two-tone process. So I will do a darker color and then a lighter color on that, and then that's it. That's all I'll do. Even on my miniatures, that's generally what I do. I'll do a darker color and the highlight, and that is really it. One nice thing about painting it black, spray painting it black, is it kind of gives you the shadows already in the recesses of the model. So that's why I like to spray paint stuff black, because you have that instant shading almost already applied to your model. So now for the application of the mud, or the dirt, the earth, so I'm just going to grab the brown paint. And then, you know, you're not trying to cover up all the dark brown, you're just trying to go over it. Okay? And so you can see some of the dark brown through it. And that gives you shade and variation of color in your model, so it looks interesting. So it doesn't just look like a flat color like it started out. Okay? So let me give you a closer look at that. Alright? So now we will finish the base, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so here I've got that application on the base. You see it looks really nice. Now while that's drying, I'm going to work on the body. And as you can see, it's just one flat color, so it's not that exciting. So I want to bring out the detail on this, because we've got some really nice detail that we did with our glue gun. So I'm going to use the a petunia purple. Alright, so I'm going to grab a large brush. Get on there. And I'm going to start applying it to this. I'm just dragging it across the surface. And see how that detail is like really popping out. So that looks really, really good. And that's just bam. You know, you've already got instant detail right there from just that different color. So that's really all. That's all that shading, you know, is. You can go further steps if you want and use even different or lighter colors or darker colors, but you know, you can get fantastic results with just even two colors, which is generally what I do. Sometimes I'll add more, but generally I just do two colors, and I find that works pretty well for me. So alright, so I'll finish this up and then we'll move on to the next step. Now, something you can do on a model of this size is you can work on other parts while the others are drying. So, you know, the body's still drying and the base is still drying, so I'm going to work on the carapace. All right. So I'm going to use a metallic prune. All right. So it's just a color with a metallic sheen to it, and I think this will make the shell look, or the carapace look interesting. So I'll just add some of that. Alright, so I'll go down the carapace. Now be careful you're not getting on those ridges, alright? I'm going to, so you see, do the center there, and just go right between those two ridges without getting on it, okay? Alright, so there we go. So I'll finish that up, and then we'll be on for the next step. Alright, our carapace came out really nice. You can see that metallic color there versus the body color. So a nice difference between the two colors. All right, now I want to add some rocks to the to this. So what I'm going to do is grab my brush, and I've got some pewter gray here, and I'll just grab some, and I'm just going to start picking out the rocks, some of the larger rocks and some of the smaller rocks. So that gives a nice variation of color here. Alright, so I'll finish those up and then we'll move on to the next step. I have finished the base and let me give you a look at that. So it's really nice. It really picks out those rocks and gives it a nice look. Alright, so now I'm going to do a little bit of highlight on the carapace ridges and the teeth. So I'm going to use a fairly small brush and I'm going to get it pretty wet. And I'm going to grab the light ivory. And I'm going to kind of go along the ridges. You see what I'm doing there? So that's kind of a highlight on that. It's not really apparent, but it adds a little bit of... Okay, so I'll finish that up. And also the teeth, I'm going to just kind of pick them out. So I'll kind of start on the end, and I'm just going to kind of hit the ends of the teeth. Alright, so I'll finish this up and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so I finished my lighter highlights, and as a last step I'm going to add some dirt on this thing. And you know, think of this behemoth like bursting through the ground. I'm going to use a fairly large brush and just grab my earth brown and just start this will kind of simulate dirt on it. Alright, so there we go. Now we've finished with all the painting. Now I've got one last step, and we'll go to the table and do that. I'm going to do one last step, and this is a step you don't have to do, but it can really add to the model. So I don't really envision these being that slimy underground, but I would think that its maw would have some slime on it. So I'm going to use my water-based varnish. You can get this in a hardware store. And if you buy one of these, it'll last you a long, long time, because see how big it is. And then I'm just going to paint the mouth and the teeth. So let me finish that up. And then we'll come back and show you what it looks like next to some miniatures at the table. And you're going to be amazed how giant this thing is. So here we have our unsuspecting party come into an area and they're like, what was that? Did the ground just shake? And they're like looking around trying to figure out what happens. And the ground shakes again. And then the tree starts to lurch. Make your check to get out of the way. Oh God. So they manage to get out of the way of the tree, but unfortunately, a gigantic purple worm comes out of the ground. And they say, run! Okay, so look how giant that is compared to those adventures. Let me turn that, get this little tree out of the way there. Put him over there. Look at that. Look how huge that is. Now that is really a purple worm, not one of these wimpy ass purple worms that they try to sell you online. So there you go. You know, this looks great, super cheap, very sturdy. It'll definitely take hard play. It's solid. So there we go. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. It took quite a while to produce it, but I think it was worth it. And it just shows that what you can make with just these simple techniques and cheap materials. So I'll see you next time on The Craft. Take care and keep crafting. Hey crafters, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the DM's Craft. Make sure to subscribe, and I have tons of other videos, as you can see. I am the originator of the 2.5D method of crafting tiles. I also do dirt cheap terrain for the table. If all this intrigues you, make sure you check out all the videos below. Also, join my forum. We have lots of great crafters on there who give advice. I have a link above and below. And last but not least, remember, go forth and craft!